On the 26th of February 2015, a photograph of a dress appeared on the internet. That is the whole setup. A photograph of a dress, and within hours it had done something that almost nothing does. It had made millions of people question whether they were seeing what they thought they were seeing. The dress was blue and black. Objectively, measurably, photographically blue and black. The kind of thing you could hold up under a spectrometer and get a number for. And yet roughly half the people who saw it were completely, calmly, absolutely certain it was white and gold. Not maybe white and gold, not probably white and gold, white and gold. Some of them argued with their partners, some of them texted screenshots to their siblings and couldn't believe the reply. A few of them even reported that after being shown the actual color values, the exact numerical code for each pixel, they still could not make the dress look blue. The information was in front of them. The truth was verified, and their brains simply refused to update. That's the story I want to start with, not because it's about a dress, but because of what the dress reveals about everything else you're looking at right now. Here's the question the dress forces into the open. If two people can look at identical photons bouncing off the same object and arrive at different, mutually contradictory, subjective certainties, then what exactly is either of them seeing? What are any of us ever seeing? I'm going to try to answer that, and I have to warn you, the answer is stranger than you're probably expecting. Because the story of the dress isn't a quirk, an optical trick, a footnote. It is a window, and maybe the clearest one we have, into the fact that you have never, not for a single moment of your life, been in direct contact with the world you are so certain exists right in front of you. The book that sent me into this particular abyss is called Being You, A New Science of Consciousness by a neuroscientist named Anil Seth. Seth is a professor of cognitive and computational neuroscience at the University of Sussex, and he spent his career studying the relationship between the brain and conscious experience. Being You came out in 2021, and I went into it the way I go into most things, skeptical, a little impatient, half expecting to feel like I had already heard the argument. I did not feel that way when I came out. The central claim of the book is this: what you call perception, the experience of seeing this room, hearing these words, feeling your own body in space, is not a window onto reality. It is the output of a process running inside your skull. A process that begins not with the world sending information to your brain, but with your brain generating predictions about what the world should look like, and then only updating those predictions when reality sends a correction. What you experience is not the world. What you experience is your brain's best current guess about the world. And that guess, that ongoing real-time prediction, is built from every prior experience you've ever had, every expectation you've ever formed, every learned assumption that is accumulated since the first time you opened your eyes as an infant. Seth calls this a controlled hallucination, and the first time I read that phrase, my instinct was to push back. A hallucination implies something false, something pathological, something untethered from reality. What I see when I look at a chair is a chair. There's a chair there. That's not a hallucination. But here's what stopped me in my tracks. Seth's argument is not that the world is fake. He's not a skeptic in that sense. He's a realist. He believes the external world is genuinely there, exerting genuine influence on your brain. His point is something more precise and, in some ways, more disturbing. The point is that the properties of your experience, the color of the chair, the brightness of the room, the weight of your own hand resting on your knee, none of those properties are delivered to you by the world as they are. They are assigned to you by your brain, based on an inference your brain makes below the threshold of your awareness, and the machinery generating your ordinary perception of a chair is exactly the same machinery generating a full clinical hallucination. The only difference is a tether. In ordinary perception, the predictions are being continuously corrected by real sensory data. In a hallucination, that correction signal is gone, or severely degraded. The engine runs the same way. The leash just goes slack. I'll come back to what that means for you personally. But first, I need to show you the evidence, because without it, this sounds like a philosophical play on words. It is not. Let's go back to the dress and look at it more carefully. The reason the dress split observers isn't random. It correlates with something specific, each observer's implicit, unconscious assumption about the lighting conditions in the photograph. The image is ambiguous. It could be a white and gold dress photographed under a bluish ambient light, the kind you get from an overcast sky, from a fluorescent tube, from daylight coming through a window. Or it could be a blue and black dress photographed under a warm tungsten lamp, the yellowed incandescent kind that used to be in every living room. Your brain cannot see the light source. It's outside the frame, so it has to infer it. It has to make a decision below your conscious awareness in roughly the time it takes you to first glance at the image about what kind of light is falling on the fabric. And then, based on that decision, it subtracts the inferred color of the light from the perceived color of the dress and delivers to your consciousness a corrected surface color. If your brain decides ambient daylight, slightly bluish, it subtracts the blue and gives you white and gold. If your brain decides tungsten lamplight, slightly yellow, it subtracts the yellow and gives you blue and black. Both brains are doing the right thing. Both are running the standard color perception algorithm, an algorithm called color constancy, which exists precisely so that a ripe banana looks yellow whether you see it in afternoon sunlight or indoor lamplight. The algorithm is well designed. It is almost always correct. But the input to the algorithm, the assumed light source, is a guess. And in this specific ambiguous photograph, two different guesses produce two different experiences, both experienced with complete, unquestioned certainty. A paper published in Current Biology in 2015 by researchers Rosa Lafer-Souza, Catherine Herman, and Bevel Conway confirmed that the dress was objectively blue and black and documented the perceptual split. A second paper in the same journal by Carl Gegenfurtner, Marina Bloy, and Matteo Toscani traced the mechanism. Both papers pointed to the same conclusion. What you see when you look at a colored object is not the wavelength of light the object reflects. It is your brain's estimate of the object's surface reflectance after subtracting its best guess about the illumination. In other words, color's not out there, color's in here. Think about that very slowly. Hold up your hand right now if you want. That particular shade, whatever you'd call it, the hue of your skin, that specific color does not exist in the room. It is not traveling through the air from your hand to your eye. It is being generated right now inside your skull by a calculation your brain is running about what your hand would look like under neutral lighting conditions. The world sends wavelengths. You experience color. They are not the same thing. And your experience is so seamless, so total, so completely lacking any edge where the inference ends and the real thing begins, that the idea of a gap between them feels absurd. That feeling of absurdity is exactly what Seth wants to explain. Now I want to walk you through a second case, and this one is one of those demonstrations that, once you've seen it, you cannot stop noticing. A professor of vision science at MIT named Edward Adelson published a simple image in 1995. It shows a green cylinder sitting on a checkerboard, casting a shadow. And in the image, there's a square labeled A outside the shadow and a square labeled B inside the shadow. A looks dark gray. B looks light gray. You would bet money that A is darker than B. Here's the fact. A and B are exactly the same shade of gray. If you measured the pixels, you would find identical numerical values. Identical, not similar. Identical. You probably either know this already and still can't quite believe it, or you're hearing it for the first time and your gut is telling you I'm wrong. Here's the more interesting part. If you draw a gray bar connecting the two squares, a bridge between them, removing them from the context of the checkerboard and the shadow, they look identical. You can suddenly see it. The same gray, obviously, unmistakably. Then you remove the bar. And the illusion snaps back? Instantly, without hesitation. Your brain reinstates the conclusion as if you never interrupted it. This is not a malfunction. This is your brain doing its job correctly, almost all of the time. In the real world, surfaces inside shadows genuinely receive less light. So if a surface inside a shadow appears as bright as a surface outside the shadow, it must actually be reflecting more light, meaning it must actually be lighter in color. Your brain makes this inference automatically every moment across your entire visual field. It is almost always right. In this particular image, it happens to be wrong. But there is no flag, no warning light, no sense of effortful conclusion, just the seamless, confident experience of two obviously different shades of gray. And here's the line that I keep coming back to. Knowing the truth did not change the experience, even after someone explained it to you, even after you measured the pixels, even after you drew the connecting bar and saw them match with your own eyes. The moment you remove the bar, the illusion is back. You cannot think your way out of it. The inference is running below the layer where your thinking lives, and it does not accept corrections from upstairs. Now ask yourself, how many of your other perceptions work the same way? Hermann von Helmholtz was asking a version of that question in 1867. He was a German physician and physicist who did foundational work in thermodynamics, optics, and electrodynamics, the kind of person who makes you feel bad about your own intellectual output. In the third volume of his massive work on physiological optics, he made an observation that was quietly revolutionary. The information arriving at your sensory organs is permanently underdetermined. What that means, in plain terms, is this. Any image on your retina is compatible with an infinite number of possible scenes in the world. A square projected on your retina could be a small square close to you or a large square far away, seen at an angle, painted with one color or another, lit from one direction or another. The retinal image alone does not tell you which is which. It never can. The data is insufficient, always, to determine a unique correct answer. So the brain does not just receive and process, it infers. It makes its best guess about the most likely cause of the signals arriving at its surface, based on accumulated experience, on statistical regularities of the world, on priors built up over a lifetime of living inside a body that moves through three-dimensional space. Helmholtz called this unconscious inference. The brain reaches a conclusion, fast, automatic, below awareness, and delivers that conclusion to you as your experience. Not as a conclusion, as a percept, as reality. This is a 19th century insight, and what makes modern neuroscience so interesting is that it has done something Helmholtz didn't live to see. It has found the machinery. The framework goes by the name of predictive processing, and the simplest way I can explain it is this. Your brain is not a camera. It does not sit passively waiting for the world to paint itself on your senses. Instead, it is constantly generating a model of what the world should look like from where you're standing right now. At every moment, it sends predictions downward through its hierarchy, from higher cortical regions where complex expectations live, to lower sensory regions where raw signals arrive. And the only thing that travels back up the hierarchy is the difference between what was predicted and what arrived. The gaps, the surprise, the error. What you experience is not the incoming data. You experience the model, the brain's best current prediction. The data coming in from your eyes and ears and skin functions as a correction signal, constantly nudging the model towards something more accurate. But the experience itself is generated from the inside out, not from the outside in. The researcher who gave this framework its most rigorous mathematical form is a neuroscientist at University College London named Carl Friston. A neuroscientist named Rao and a computational researcher named Ballard demonstrated in 1999 that this kind of architecture, where predictions flow downward and errors flow upward, is computationally plausible for the visual cortex. A philosopher named Andy Clark, in a book called Surfing Uncertainty, laid out the broader implications with unusual clarity for a philosopher. And Seth, being you, took the framework and pushed it to its most provocative conclusion, that it explains not just how you see, but what you are. I'll come back to that. But first, let me show you the hollow face. You have probably encountered this demonstration without knowing who designed it. A mask of a human face, a realistic one, is held up, and you observe it from the outside, normal, convex. A face presses outward toward you. Then, The mask is slowly rotated, and you see the inner side, the concave side, the hollow side, the side that curves away from you like the inside of a bowl. Except, you don't see it curve away. You see it curve outward. Even knowing that you're looking at the inside of a hollow mask, even watching it rotate and understanding the geometry, your brain insists on showing you a convex face, a face that pushes toward you. And when it moves, the illusion does something that's genuinely unsettling. The face appears to follow you, to track you, because your brain keeps recomputing the geometry in the direction that makes sense for a convex surface rather than acknowledging the concave truth. This builds on something the psychologist Richard Gregory spent decades exploring. Gregory argued in his 1966 book Eye and Brain that perception is not a passive recording, but a process of active hypothesis testing. Your brain proposes hypotheses. That thing is a face, and faces are convex, and accepts or rejects them based on sensory evidence. When the sensory evidence is ambiguous or contradictory, the prior hypothesis wins. Your prior belief about what faces look like is so strong, so deeply encoded from a lifetime of face experience, that it literally overrides the depth information your visual system is computing. The raw signal says concave, the hypothesis says convex, you see convex, the conclusion beats the data. And what's haunting about this is not just the illusion itself, it's what the illusion reveals about the baseline. If your prior can win so completely against contradictory sensory information in this case, can override geometry, override depth, override your own explicit knowledge of what you're looking at, then you have to ask, how many other priors are winning right now in your normal everyday perception of the world around you with no demonstration to make them visible? There is no experiment to tell you. That is the problem. Let me take you into a lab. The year is 1998. Two researchers at Princeton, Matthew Botvinnik and Jonathan Cohen, are running an experiment that seems almost rudimentary. A participant sits at a table. One of their hands is hidden from view behind a small partition. On the table in front of them, in the position where the real hand would be if it were visible, sits a rubber hand, a realistic prosthetic, anatomically plausible, positioned naturally. An experimenter picks up a small brush and then, synchronously, simultaneously, brushes both the hidden real hand and the visible rubber hand. Same stroke, same rhythm, same timing. For about 60 to 90 seconds, nothing dramatic happens. The participant watches the brush move across the rubber hand and feels the brush on their own hidden hand at the same time, in the same tempo. And then something shifts. The participant reports that the touch feels like it's coming from the rubber hand. Not kind of, not sort of. The felt sense of where their hand is has migrated. The rubber hand, made of latex and foam, has become part of their body map. They feel it as theirs. Botvinnik and Cohen published this in the journal Nature, and it's since been replicated many times. But the detail that I find genuinely difficult to integrate is this: when the experimenter then produced a hammer and made a sudden threatening gesture toward the rubber hand, the participant flinched. And here's the part that stops me. The real, hidden hand showed a measurable drop in skin temperature. The hand that was not threatened, that was not touched, that was not even visible, got colder. Because the brain had updated its model of the body and the physiological consequences were real. The map changed and the territory followed. This is your sense of bodily ownership. The felt certainty that this hand is your hand, that this body is your body, that you are in here and the world is out there. It feels primordial. It feels like the one thing that couldn't possibly be a construction. And it was rearranged in 90 seconds with a brush and a rubber glove. Seth's argument is that bodily self-perception runs on exactly the same predictive machinery as external perception. Your brain is constantly predicting what signals it should receive from your body, from your skin, your muscles, your joints, your organs. The felt sense of having a body, of being located somewhere specific in space, of being bounded by a skin, all of that is the brain's current best model of what it would feel like to be this organism. And like all models, it is subject to update. It can be updated with correct information. It can also be updated with incorrect information if the incorrect information is consistent enough to win the inference. What the rubber hand illusion reveals is that there is no bedrock, no anchor, no part of your experience of being physically located in a body that is exempt from this process. And if you're starting to feel like that's philosophically vertiginous, hold on, because it gets more specific. Think about what happens when the model persists after the territory is gone. Patients who have lost a limb, through surgery, through trauma, through any cause, very commonly continue to experience the missing limb. They feel it. They can locate it in space. They can sometimes move it, or at least experience the sensation of moving it. And a significant portion of those patients experience pain in the limb that no longer exists, burning, cramping, stabbing pain in a hand that has not been there for years. The clinical name is phantom limb pain, and it is thoroughly documented, and it raises something that I find genuinely hard to look at directly. The brain's model of the body can generate authentic pain signals in the complete absence of the body part doing the signaling. There is no hand. There is pain in the hand. The map is hurting, even though the territory has vanished. A neuroscientist named V.S. Ramachandran at UC San Diego began working on this in the 1990s. He noticed that some phantom limb patients experienced their phantom as permanently frozen, clenched in a fist, or twisted in a position they couldn't release. And because the brain is a prediction machine, and the prediction machine was not receiving any correction signals from the missing limb, it couldn't update. The cramped phantom stayed cramped. Ramachandran's solution is one of those things that seems almost too simple to be real. He built what he called a mirror box, a box with a mirror dividing it, into which the patient places their intact limb. When positioned correctly, the mirror shows a reflection of the intact hand in the spatial location of the missing hand. The patient moves the intact hand, opens it, unclenches the fist, and in the mirror, they see the phantom hand unclenching. They feel the phantom release, the cramping subsides, a mirror, a reflection of a hand, relieving pain in a hand that doesn't exist, one hallucination correcting another. The brain's model of the missing hand, which has been locked in a frozen, painful configuration because it never received any correction signal, finally gets updated, because a carefully arranged visual illusion provides a plausible correction signal. The model accepts the illusion as evidence. The pain changes. What you are seeing when you look at this is the brain's predictive machinery in action in its most naked form. The pain was never coming from the hand. It was always coming from the model. And the model responds to evidence, even fake evidence, even a mirror. Now, ask yourself, if pain, something as immediate, as urgent, as undeniably real as pain, is a property of the model rather than a direct report from the body, what does that tell you about your other experiences of your body right now, sitting wherever you are? The weight of your back in the chair, the temperature of the air on your forearms, the quiet pulse you can feel in your wrists if you pay attention. All of it is the model. There is no other access. There's one more demonstration I want to walk you through before we zoom out. And this one is important because it shows you not just that perception is a construction, but that consciousness and the physical world can come apart in real time with your eyes open. The phenomenon is called binocular rivalry. The setup is simple. Present one image to your left eye, say a set of red horizontal stripes, and a completely different image to your right eye, green vertical stripes. If your perception were simply an averaging or merging of the two signals, you'd see some reddish-greenish diagonal something, a blend, a mixture. You don't see that. What you see is the red stripes for a few seconds. Then, without any warning, without any change in the physical input, the image flips. You see the green stripes, then it flips back. And so on, alternating spontaneously, unpredictably, for as long as you hold the setup in place. The physical world didn't change. The photons arriving at your eyes didn't change. Your conscious experience changed, on its own, driven by something happening inside, below your awareness. The phenomenon has been documented since the 19th century. Researchers, including Francis Crick and Christoph Koch, used it extensively as a tool for studying consciousness precisely because of this property. It lets you hold the sensory input constant while the conscious percept varies. And what that tells you is something that predictive processing makes sense of. Your conscious experience is not a readout of the sensory input. It is the current winning prediction, the currently dominant model, and that model shifts, competes with alternative models, gets overridden by the other prediction that has been building up behind it. Your experience is the output of a competition between internal hypotheses. The world is the referee most of the time, but sometimes the game plays out without the referee noticing. Dreams are the obvious extension of this. When you sleep, the sensory tether, the continuous flow of correction signals from the world, is dramatically reduced. The prediction machine keeps running. It generates experiences. Those experiences feel utterly real while they are happening. The room you find yourself in during a dream has walls you can touch, light you can perceive, people with faces that appear specific and present, and then you wake up and learn that all of that was generated from the inside, running unanchored, with no world to correct it. Seth's formulation, which I keep turning over because I can't find a clean objection to it, the difference between a dream and waking perception, is not a difference in kind. It is a difference in degree of tethering. Your waking brain is running the same generative model. It is simply being held more tightly to the world by the continuous correction signals flowing in from your senses. The kite in flight and the kite that is broken free are both kites, both flying. The difference is the string. And now I want to sit with what that actually implies, because if the mechanism is the same, if the difference between dreaming and waking is a matter of how tightly the model is leashed to the world, then something follows that I found genuinely difficult to absorb. The difference between your current experience and a hallucination is not a difference in what kind of process is running. It is a difference in how much external data is being allowed to update that process. The hallucinating person and the perceiving person are both sitting inside a skull-enclosed prediction engine. The hallucinating person's engine has lost its grip on the tether. Yours hasn't. That is the entire difference. Right now, inside your skull, there is no light, there is no color, there is no sound. There is a roughly 1.3 kilogram organ running predictions in the dark, and what you call reality is its best current output. That's not metaphor. That is anatomy. Now, here is something I want to be careful about, because this is exactly the point where the argument can go wrong, and where it has gone wrong in a lot of pop science coverage of this topic. None of what I've said so far means the world is fake. None of it means your perceptions are arbitrary. None of it means you are locked in a hallucination with no relationship to anything real. Seth is not making that argument. Helmholtz was not making that argument. The predictive processing framework is not skepticism in disguise. Here is what the framework actually says. The brain is trying to track a real world. The model is continuously updated by real signals from that world. The whole point of the prediction error correction system is to keep the model accurate, to make sure the gap between your predictions and the actual world stays small. And over evolutionary time, over a lifetime of learning, that system has become extraordinarily good at its job. The controlled hallucination is controlled by a real external world, and that control is mostly very effective. What the framework says, and what is genuinely established, is that the properties of your experience are not identical to the properties of the world. Color is not a wavelength. Brightness is not photon intensity. The specific quality of what it is like to touch something, to smell something, to hear something. Those qualities are generated by your brain as a representation, and the representation is designed to track the world without being identical to it. Think of a map. A good map of a city is not the city. It has its own conventions, colors that mean certain things, symbols that stand in for other things, a scale that compresses distance. But a good map of a city tracks the city accurately enough to get you where you need to go. And if the city changes and your map doesn't update, you get lost. The map and the city are different things. The map is your experience. The city is whatever is out there. The question you cannot answer, and this is the part that Seth is honest about, is what the city actually looks like, independent of any map. You cannot step outside the map to check. Every instrument you use to measure the world is processed through the same predictive system. Every second look, every scientific experiment, every calibration check runs through the same machinery. There is no view from nowhere. There is no moment at which you perceive the world without perceiving it through the model. I want to be fair to the people who push back on this, because the pushback is not stupid. The philosopher John Searle at UC Berkeley has argued for decades that calling ordinary perception a hallucination is a category error. His point is precise. A hallucination, by standard definition in both psychiatry and philosophy, is a perception in the absence of an appropriate external cause. But your perception of a chair when there is a real chair in front of you has a cause. The chair is causing your experience. That is, by the standard definition, not a hallucination. It is correct perception. Calling it a hallucination, on this view, is a rhetorical move, an attention-grabbing framing that makes things sound stranger than they are, without actually adding insight. The philosopher Alva Noe, also at Berkeley, takes the argument even further. In his book Action and Perception, and later in Strange Tools, Noe argues that framing perception as an internal model happening inside the skull mislocates what perception actually is. Perception, on Noe's account, is not something the brain does. It is something you do, an activity involving your body, your movement, your engagement with the world. The brain is necessary but not sufficient. Perception is distributed across brain, body, and environment. Pulling it into the skull and calling it a model distorts what's actually happening. These are serious objections. I don't want to wave them off. What Seth says in response, and I think this is a fair summary, is that controlled hallucination is a deliberately provocative framing, and that the provocation is intentional. Not because it is literally definitionally correct by the psychiatric use of the word, but because it does something important. It forces the question of how the brain generates experience at all. The perception as window picture forecloses that question before you even ask it. If perception is just a window, just the world painting itself on your senses, then there is no generating process to explain. But the generating process is real. The machinery is there. The prediction error architecture is there. The demonstrable constructive effects are there. The word hallucination is an alarm, not a definition. It is meant to wake you up to the fact that something is being built. Whether you think that's the right way to wake someone up is a fair question, but I don't think it changes what's being built. Here is where it gets genuinely strange, because the predictive processing framework is not just a story about how you see colors and shapes. It has been applied by serious researchers in peer-reviewed journals to some of the most extreme states of human consciousness. And what those applications reveal is something that should, if you follow it honestly, make your relationship to the word normal feel much less stable. Consider what happens under psychedelics. In 2019, a researcher named Robin Carhart Harris, then at Imperial College London, now at UC San Francisco, and Carl Friston, proposed a model called Rebus, Relaxed Beliefs Under Psychedelics. The model is an attempt to explain what psychedelic substances actually do to the brain's predictive machinery. The proposal is this. In ordinary perception, the high-level regions of the brain, the areas that hold your accumulated priors, your learned beliefs about what the world looks like, your top-down expectations, exert a strong influence over the lower-level sensory processing. Your priors are precise. They are confidently held. They dominate the incoming signals. This is what makes perception stable, consistent, and recognizable across different lighting conditions, different angles, different sensory noise. Your priors keep the model anchored. What psychedelics appear to do, according to Rebus, is reduce the precision of those high-level priors. They loosen the grip of the top-down predictions. And when the priors relax, the lower-level sensory signals, the raw, unfiltered data coming in from eyes and ears and skin, gain relative influence. Things look more vivid, more surprising, more strange, because the brain is no longer overriding the incoming data with its confident expectations. The world presses through. The part of this that I find genuinely hard to stop thinking about is the implication for ordinary experience. If the psychedelic state is what happens when your priors lose precision, when the top-down predictions relax, then your ordinary state is defined by the opposite, priors that are precise, confident and dominant, which means that right now, the world you're experiencing is not a high-fidelity recording of incoming data. It is a heavily prior-weighted, expectation-dominated, top-down suppressed version of the incoming data. Your priors are doing enormous work every moment to make experience feel consistent and stable and recognizable. The Rebus model is current science and peer-reviewed, but it is not settled. It is a hypothesis. I want to be clear about that. But it suggests something unsettling, that the normal you trust as a baseline is itself a heavily filtered construction, and the filter is tuned not for accuracy, but for stability. And then, there is what the same framework is beginning to say about psychosis. A researcher at Yale named Philip Corlett, along with colleagues in related fields, has been exploring the idea that certain psychotic symptoms, hallucinations, delusions, the experience of seeing things that aren't there or being certain of things that aren't true, may be understood as disorders of prediction error weighting. The brain is still running the same predictive machinery, but something about the weighting has gone wrong. Either the priors are held with excessive confidence, refusing to update even in the face of contradictory evidence, or the prediction error signals themselves are being flagged as meaningful when they arise from noise. The machinery generates an experience that is disconnected from what most people would agree is happening. I want to be careful here. This is an active research hypothesis. It is contested. And I'm not saying that psychosis is just an extreme form of ordinary perception, or that ordinary perception is just mild psychosis. That would be both scientifically imprecise and unfair to people who live with severe psychiatric illness. But the framework suggests something more modest and possibly more disturbing. That psychotic experience and ordinary experience are points on a continuum, not categorically different processes. The machinery is shared, the weighting is different, and the same mechanism that keeps your perception accurate and your beliefs calibrated, that tether, that continuous correction, is the mechanism whose disruption produces experiences that most of us would call a break from reality. Dreams, psychedelics, psychosis, ordinary waking perception, one framework, one set of machinery, different levels of tethering, different precision on the priors. If I told you a week ago that these four states ran on the same process, you would probably have said, "Interesting, but surely normal perception is in a category by itself. Normal perception is anchored, the others are not." But what anchored actually means when you trace it out is, your priors are precise enough, and your sensory correction signals are strong enough that your model stays stable and mostly tracks the world. It doesn't mean you're in contact with reality in some direct, unmediated sense. It means your controlled hallucination is well controlled. That is the whole claim, and it is not as comforting as it might first sound. Now, I want to take all of this and turn it somewhere more personal, because this is where the argument shifts from being intellectually interesting to being something else. You have been awake, let's say, for most of today. You have moved through a sequence of rooms, conversations, moments. You ate something, you read something, you thought something. And throughout all of that, you experienced, with seamless continuity, with absolute apparent immediacy, the feeling of being present, of being here, of being the one who is experiencing all of it. But I want to ask you a simple question that I find surprisingly hard to answer when I look at it directly. When exactly did you actually see today? Not look at, not have sensory signals from, but see, experience with the kind of direct, unmediated present tense contact that the word implies. Because what you know now, if you've been following any of this, is that what you experienced as the present moment was, at every instant, several hundred milliseconds behind the real-time world. The processing lag alone means that your now is always the past, slightly. And beyond the processing lag, what you experienced in each moment was not the raw data. It was the model, the prior weighted top-down shaped expectation-filtered output of a prediction engine. How much of today was actually the world, and how much was what your brain expected the world to look like? The honest answer is, you cannot separate them. They arrive together, indistinguishable. The experience is seamless. The construction leaves no seams. And here's the thing about that seamlessness that I have spent a lot of time with. It is not a bug, it is the feature. A seam would mean a discontinuity in the model, a moment where the prediction failed badly enough to leave a gap. The whole point of the prediction error correction system is to keep the model smooth and continuous, and it does its job so well that the construction is invisible from the inside. You live inside the model the way you live inside a room. You do not experience the walls as walls, you experience them as simply there. But the room is built, it is always being built, and the builder is not separate from you, sitting at some remove, constructing an experience, and then handing it to the real you who lives inside it. The builder is you. Or rather, the brain running the predictions and the you who experiences the output of those predictions are not two separate things. There is no second layer. There is no inner observer who receives the hallucination and judges it against reality. This is where the argument arrives at something that I think is genuinely difficult to look at without flinching. The self, the felt sense of being you. Seth spends a significant part of being you on this, and it is where the predictive processing account becomes something more than a story about color constancy and rubber hands. The argument is that the felt sense of being a self, the experience of being a unified, continuous, bounded observer, somewhere behind your eyes, receiving information about the world, is itself a model. It is the brain's model of the organism, an inference, a prediction. Think about it the way you would think about the rubber hand. In the rubber hand illusion, the felt sense of hand ownership migrated to a latex prop in 90 seconds because the brain updated its bodily model based on consistent sensory evidence. The ownership is the model. It is not the physical hand. Now scale that up. The felt sense of being you, of being this particular locus of experience with this history, this perspective, this name, is the brain's model of what it is like to be this organism. It includes a model of your body, a model of your position in space, a model of your history and memory, and a model of yourself as the cause of your own actions. And all of those models are built and maintained by the same predictive machinery that builds the color of the dress and the brightness of the checkerboard square. There is no observer who exists separately from this modeling process, receiving its output. The observer is constituted by the modeling process. Seth draws on the philosopher Thomas Metzinger here, the idea that the self is a model the brain builds of itself, transparent to itself, which means you experience it as reality rather than representation. You look through the self-model rather than at it, the way you look through a clean window without seeing the glass. A window you can see is a window that has become visible, dirty, cracked, fogged. A window you can't see is doing its job. Your self-model is doing its job. And the implication, the one that I genuinely could not shake after reading it, is that the phrase, "you are having an experience," is slightly off. It implies that you, some fixed pre-existing entity, are the site where experience arrives. But if the self is itself a construction generated by the same process that generates experience, then the more accurate picture is something like, there is a process generating experience, and part of what it generates is the sense of being a self who is having it. The experience and the experiencer are constructed together. There is no one home who was there before the experience arrived. The sense of being home, of being the permanent resident, is also being constructed right now in real time. This should feel strange to contemplate. If it doesn't, you're probably not following it fully. Because what it means is that the thing you are most certain about, more certain than the color of the dress, more certain than the shade of the checker square, more certain than even the location of your own hand, is itself a model. The certainty is part of the construction, and models can be right. Seth would insist on this. The self-model can be accurate. The brain's model of what it is like to be this organism can track the real causal structures of the organism, the real history, the real dispositions, the real patterns of thought with remarkable fidelity. Being a model doesn't make it wrong, it makes it a model. But two people standing in the same room are not, in any full sense, in the same room. Their priors are different, Their self-models are different. Their prediction machines have been built from different lives, different bodies, different accumulated histories of sensory error correction. What you experience as the room is not what anyone else experiences as the room. And both of you, both rooms, are being generated right now, in real time, inside separate skulls, by separate prediction engines that have never once had direct contact with each other or with whatever is actually there. Two different controlled hallucinations, overlapping just enough to coordinate, sharing just enough predictive structure to navigate the same space, understand the same words, argue about the color of the same dress. And now I want to push on something that the self as model idea opens up, because I think there is a layer beneath it that is even harder to sit with. When you remember something, when you recall a specific moment from your past, a conversation, a room you were in, a feeling, you almost certainly experience that memory as a retrieval, as though there is a record stored somewhere and you are playing it back. The past is fixed. The record is what it is. You are simply accessing it. This is not how memory works. Memory is reconstructive. Every time you recall something, you are not playing back a stored file. You are generating a new version of the event, assembled in the moment from fragments, shaped by everything that has happened since, updated by your current emotional state and your current beliefs. The neuroscience on this is well established. Memory is not a photograph. It is a painting, repainted every time you look at it, slightly differently each time, shaped by what you expect to find there. Which means the person you remember being 5 years ago, 10 years ago, last week, that person is a construction. Not a fabrication, not a lie, but a construction, assembled from fragments by the same prediction engine, using your current priors to fill in what the fragments don't specify. The you of 5 years ago is being generated right now in real time by the brain you have today. You have never had unmediated access to your own past. You have only ever had access to your current model of your past. And this has a consequence that I want to state plainly, because I don't think it's usually said plainly enough. The continuity you feel between the person you were yesterday and the person you are today, the sense of being the same self, the same thread, running through time, that continuity is also generated. It is not found. It is made. The narrative of your life, the through line you could tell if someone asked you to describe yourself, is something your brain constructs, not something it discovers. The story is assembled from predictions, from prior weighted reconstructions, from the self-model the brain has been maintaining and updating throughout your life. This doesn't mean the continuity is fake. The same caution applies as with perception. A constructed continuity can still accurately track real causal patterns in the world, real dispositions, real histories, real relationships between who you were and who you are. But it is assembled, and the assembly process has the same characteristic as all the other predictive processes we've looked at. It is seamless from the inside, invisible, and it does not announce itself. You experience the narrative as simply true. You do not experience the assembly happening. There is a thought experiment I keep returning to, attributed to no one in particular. It seems to emerge independently from anyone who spends time with these ideas, and it goes like this. Imagine that you could pause your experience, not lose consciousness, but somehow freeze your perceptual model, hold it still, and then let the actual sensory data arrive without any prior weighting, without any top-down prediction, without any expectation at all, just the raw input. The electromagnetic radiation, the pressure waves, the temperature gradients, the chemical signals, the actual physics of the moment. You would not recognize it, not because your brain is doing something wrong, but because recognition is what priors do. To recognize something is to match incoming data against an expectation. Remove the expectation, and what arrives is just signal. Not organized into objects, not organized into space, not organized into self and world. Just cascading electrochemical noise, uninterpreted. The room you are in right now, the specific, lived, textured experience of it, exists because your brain has spent decades learning to interpret signals like these and assemble them into rooms. The room is not given to you. It is achieved. And the achievement is so complete and so fast and so deeply below your awareness that it feels like no achievement at all. It feels like simply seeing what is there. But seeing what is there is not a passive act. It is one of the most sophisticated things a brain can do. Here's the part that I find genuinely hard to explain why it unsettles me so much, but I'll try. There is a question in philosophy of mind called the hard problem of consciousness. It was named and articulated by a philosopher named David Chalmers in a 1995 paper with the simple title, Facing Up to the Problem of Consciousness. And the hard problem is this: why does any of this produce experience at all? Predictive processing, the whole framework we've been walking through, is what Chalmers would call a solution to the easy problems of consciousness. Not easy in the sense of simple, easy in the sense of tractable. You can, in principle, explain how the brain processes information, how it generates predictions, how it corrects errors, how it models the body and the self. These are hard scientific problems, but they are the kind of problems that progress can be made on. You can study them. You can build mathematical models of them. You can find their neural correlates. The hard problem is different. Even if you fully explained every computational process in the brain, every prediction, every error signal, every model update, you would still not have answered this. Why is there something it is like to be that brain? Why does any of this produce subjective experience? Why doesn't all of this information processing happen in the dark, with no inner light, no felt quality, no one home? A thermostat processes information about temperature. It responds to its inputs. It updates its outputs. There is presumably nothing it is like to be a thermostat. The hard problem is asking, why is there something it is like to be you? What is the step from computation to experience? Seth's position in being you is that the hard problem is the wrong question. He argues it should be dissolved rather than solved, that the apparent mysteriousness of consciousness is itself a product of the prediction machinery, a kind of illusion generated by the self-model, and that asking, why is there something it is like, is asking a question that is poorly formed. He thinks that if you fully understand the construction, the mystery evaporates. Chalmers disagrees. He thinks Seth is changing the subject, explaining the functional story very well while simply declining to address the felt quality underneath it. The redness of red. The painfulness of pain, the specific what it is likeness of any experience at all. I want to say clearly, this debate is live. It is substantive. It involves some of the sharpest minds in philosophy and neuroscience, and it is not resolved. I find Seth's position intellectually compelling in many ways. I also find that when I try to actually dissolve the hard problem in the way Seth suggests, when I try to feel the mystery disappearing, it doesn't quite disappear for me. Some residue remains, some quality of the experience that the functional story doesn't seem to touch. Maybe that's a failure of imagination on my part. Maybe I'm not following Seth's argument fully enough. I think that's possible. But I also think Chalmers is pointing at something real when he insists that explaining how the brain generates representations and models and predictions does not automatically explain why those representations feel like anything, and I don't want to pretend otherwise. So here is where the full picture sits, if I try to draw it honestly. What is established, what the experiments confirm, what the mechanisms support, what you can verify for yourself with a checkerboard and a piece of paper, is that perception is not direct contact with the world. It is a construction built by a prediction engine running inside your skull, shaped by priors you didn't choose, updated by error signals you never consciously observe, seamless from the inside and invisible to introspection. The color of the dress, the shade of the checkerboard square, the location of your own hand, the boundaries of your own body, the continuity of your own self across time. All of it is assembled, not received. All of it is the model. What is argued, powerfully by Seth, building on Helmholtz and Friston and Rao and Ballard and decades of neuroscience, is that this is the right way to think about consciousness itself, that not just perception, but the entire felt quality of experience, including the felt self, is the brain's controlled hallucination. That dreams and psychosis and ordinary waking perception and the altered states induced by psychedelics are all points on one continuum, differing in how tightly the model is tethered to the world. What is genuinely contested by Chalmers, by Searle, by Noe, and by others with serious arguments is whether the predictive processing framework, even if it explains everything functional about consciousness, explains why there is experience at all. And the most honest thing I can say is, I don't know. I find Seth's argument the most satisfying scientific account I've encountered. I also find that the hardest part of the hard problem doesn't entirely dissolve for me when I read it. Both of those things are true simultaneously. What I am certain of, as certain as I can be of anything I've encountered in this area, is that the comfortable picture is wrong. The window is not a window. The view is not a view. Whatever is happening when you look at the world, it is not the world painting itself directly onto your awareness. It is something your brain is doing right now, faster than thought, below awareness, building the most convincing thing it has ever built. And you are living inside it. You have been living inside it your entire life, and you had no idea. Let me bring it somewhere specific, somewhere you can feel. Think about waking up this morning, the exact moment, if you can locate it, when consciousness came back. The room assembling itself in the dark, shapes becoming familiar, light levels registering, the particular quality of the air, the particular weight of the morning. What you experienced in those first few seconds was the model coming back online. The prediction machine rebooting after the tether of sleep, gradually re-engaging with the correction signals from the world, stabilizing the hallucination into something recognizable. And the moment it stabilized, the moment you recognized the room, felt like waking up to reality. It felt like coming back from somewhere else into contact with the real. But what came back was the model. The real never stopped being processed. The signals never stopped arriving. The tether was simply being re-established, prediction by prediction, until the model was stable enough to be experienced as the room. There was a moment this morning, probably before you were fully aware, when your brain was already building the world. When the prediction engine was already running, already generating the first outlines of the day, and you were not yet there to experience it. And then you were. And the question of where exactly you arrived in that sequence is not a question I know how to answer, and I don't think anyone else does either. You probably subscribe to some version of the following belief, held without examining it too closely, that there is a world out there, and that you perceive it, and that your perception, while imperfect, is basically a faithful representation of what is actually there. The colors might shift under different lighting. You might misremember details. You might occasionally be fooled by an optical illusion. But fundamentally, you are in contact with a shared reality, and your experience of it is mostly accurate. Nothing in this story says that belief is wrong, but it says something about what accurate means and what contact means, and what you are actually doing when you perceive. You are not receiving the world. You are predicting it continuously and being corrected when you predict wrong. The world gets a vote. It keeps the hallucination controlled, but the experience, the specific, textured, felt, luminous experience of being in a room on a day in a life, that is yours. It is being made right now from the inside. And that means that two people standing next to each other, looking at the same thing, are each standing inside a different construction, each built from different priors, each shaped by a different life, each filtered through a different body. And neither one of them can step outside their construction to compare it against the other, or against reality, or against anything at all. The only comparison available is between models, one model checking itself against the correction signals arriving from the world over and over for as long as the brain keeps running. That is what perception is. That is all it has ever been. The version of today that you lived, the specific quality of the light, the particular weight of the hours, the texture of the conversations, was yours in a way that is more absolute than you might have realized. Not yours in a sentimental sense, yours in a structural sense. It was generated by you from the inside, using everything you have ever learned, shaped by every prior you have ever formed. Nobody else had that day. Nobody else could have. I want to go back to the dress. 26th of February, 2015. A photograph. Half the world saw white and gold, half saw blue and black. And what made it viral, what made it spread the way it did, what made people screenshot it and send it to their families and argue about it for days, was not the disagreement. It was the certainty. Both sides were certain, not guessing, not hedging, certain in the way you are certain about things you have simply seen with your own eyes. Both sides were right to be certain. Their brains had done exactly what brains do. They had run the inference, filled in the illuminant, assigned the colors, and delivered the result as experience. Not as conclusion, as reality, as the obvious, unambiguous, how could anyone think otherwise truth of what the dress looked like. And here's the thing I keep coming back to. The dress was one object, a photograph, a fixed set of pixels. There was a fact of the matter, and still two people could look at it and live in different perceptual worlds, each completely sealed inside their own certainty, with no seam, no warning, no felt sense that anything was being constructed. Now, look around you. The room you're in, the light, the colors, the specific quality of this moment, all of it assembled right now inside a skull that has never once been in direct contact with any of it. All of it, the output of a prediction engine that has been running since before you could speak, building the world from the inside out, and never once leaving a seam. You are the most convincing thing your brain has ever made. And so is everything you see.